So, school. We've all gone through some version of schooling. Some arguably better than others, depends on who you are. But regardless of what form of schooling one goes through, there's always bound to be some interesting stories. And looking at my educational history, I figured I'd share some of mine. I already made a video about school trips, so I'll leave those stories out of this video. Meanwhile, the art in the background is a new Major's Journey promotional piece. With all that said, let's get into it. I guess one of the first stories that comes to mind would be from second grade, but I'm going to preface that I was, during the majority of my elementary school days, bullied via isolation and distance. Mainly so. I'm genuinely going to be wishy-washy with that aspect because I don't want to be a downer. I really don't. So, it was recess in second grade, and I was running around until I noticed my classmates were in some sort of circle. They raised their arms up and started yelling. Not really having anything else to do, I decided to run to the outer edge of the circle and join them. Well, suddenly, everyone backed up because a girl in my class had expressed pain and was holding her throat. Everyone looked at me, and the next thing I knew, I was getting scolded for scratching her throat. I was so confused, but for some reason I went along with it and just let myself get in trouble. I ended up with a day of in-school suspension, and I'm gonna be honest, that day of suspension was generally the best day of second grade for me. To this day, I have no idea what exactly happened. Like, I don't know if they just blamed me because I just ran up, or I got set up, or heck, maybe I actually did it, but didn't realize, but I can't really think that's what happened because I've always kept my nails short, but that's an eternal mystery and that I'm just stuck randomly thinking about, just not really sure what happened. You know, from second grade all the way to fifth grade, I was in reading assistance classes. Basically, I was pulled out of class with a few other students to sit at computers and read short stories and answer questions about them. According to my dad, when I asked about it, the reason I was put in these classes is because I've had this habit of jumping ahead of any story I was reading. Basically, I would read a passage and then I would suddenly jump forward a decent bit ahead in the book, skipping everything before it. A speed reader in a very unfortunate way. I was put in the reading assistance classes to help correct this habit. I changed schools a lot due to moving houses, so I had separate versions of these classes. Most of them were pretty similar, a small group of students taken to a computer room, and we worked on digital reading programs with various levels. Sometimes we'd get fast food lunch with the teacher if we passed a level. But in 4th and 5th grade, my reading assistance was a whole ass separate class. And it was pretty alright, they got me to like pizza. It was also around this time where I got put into speech therapy because I've always had a speech impediment. Aside from my stutter that tends to intensify whenever I'm nervous or stressed, I've also had a tendency to pronounce my R's very softly, which makes my speech very off-sounding. It's also why I have a hard time speaking Spanish, since some words require rolling the R's, which I've never been able to do well. Lo siento, abuela. Heck, I bet you can catch the instances where I'm fighting my speech impediment in order to speak clearly. I was mainly taught via board games on how to pronounce my R's and put emphasis is where they need to be. So you guys want to hear about the time where I really felt wronged by the school system? Okay, so for some context, whenever my sibling and I would go to the dentist during the school day, we'd go home for the rest of the day, regardless of how early in the day it was. So one day, my 5th grade teacher had to leave early, and she brought in a substitute teacher. Coincidentally, I also had to leave early for a dentist appointment around the same time, and my teacher left. But apparently, my 5th grade class was an absolute nightmare for this poor substitute that the next day when I walked into the classroom, the whiteboard was covered, and I mean covered, in apologies to our teacher about their behavior, and I was just standing there staring at it while thinking, what in the heck did y'all do? My teacher came in that day pissed and started the day with about a half-hour lecture about how the class treated the sub and how at their age they should know better. Heck, the tense air in Mrs. O's anger made me feel guilty, and I wasn't even there! She then announced that the whole class would stay inside for about half of recess as punishment. That's where I quietly asked if that would include me, since, again, I wasn't there. To which she confirmed that I was also being punished. Not only did that confuse me, but it also annoyed me. Because what the heck do you mean I'm being punished for something I was not involved in? Surprisingly, even a few classmates voiced confusion at this. But regardless, I was punished with the class. Now, obviously, I know Miss O couldn't reasonably just exclude me from the punishment just because I was out of class. It'd be seen as unfair and that only one kid got off. But in that moment, that was by far the most frustrated and annoyed I have ever felt at school. I was pretty pissed at my classmates, and the air was filled with tension that day. Especially when my teacher mentioned the class's ages, because, fun fact, I've always been older than a majority of my classmates. Yeah, the most frequent question I would get about myself from my classmates would be, were you held back? Because I'm a year older than my graduating class. But the thing is, I was not held back. I am just a September baby. School in my part of the US starts in August. So in the year I turned 5 years old for kindergarten, I couldn't actually enter kindergarten because I was not actually 5 for another month. And I couldn't wait until after my birthday to enter the school system because the school year would have already started. So I waited a whole extra year to start school. This also meant that I was just about the earliest birthday celebration in class because a majority of my classmates were born in spring or summer, which is why they were so confused about my age. They were born the year after I was. Are there any other autumn-born folks who can relate to this, or was there a workaround that my parents just did not know about? Rewinding a bit back to second grade, I've got some PE-related stories. So one defining thing about me in school was that I was by far the shortest kid in my class. I'm pretty sure I was just over half the height of my classmates. Anyways, my class had a PE unit where we would go to the local YMCA for swimming lessons, and I was the only one who was not able to touch the bottom of the shallow end with my feet. So one day during warm-ups, I was sent to the pool stairs just so I could do the exercises properly. Another day, we were being taught how to play basketball in PE, and to demonstrate how physical build affects skill, my teacher asked who was the shortest student in the class, and my classmates unanimously said it was me. So the teacher called me up and had me try to make a basket. Needless to say, I did not even get close. The PE teacher sent me back and explained why I did not make it. It was embarrassing. So this third story is probably my most memorable. We were on our way to PE class, and I was walking behind some of my bullies, looking down and fidgeting with my hands. And unbeknownst to me, as my quote-unquote main bully looked at me, she was met with me having an absent-minded look on my face while holding up a rather crude gesture, especially for a 9-year-old. She freaked out and started drawing attention to what I was doing, and I was genuinely confused at why everyone was yelling at me. And in all my tiny, childlike innocence, I was like, I don't understand what's going on. All I did was this. And I held up the motion again. You can imagine the commotion that caused. I had to sit out for half of PE because of that, and I didn't even know what I did wrong. When I got home that day, I told my mom what happened, and I am not kidding, I showed her the gesture I did! I got scolded pretty majorly, but I was still confused, and Mama just told me it was a mean gesture and not to use it. But these days, I just kind of snicker. At the time, I basically accidentally flipped off my bully. Twice! Fast forward to 4th grade, I had an incident in PE back then too. Y'all remember the Fitness Gram PACE test? Of course you do. It's a canon event for a student in the United States. Well, one day, my class was doing the PACE test, and I was preparing myself to run as I was never a fast runner. But when the first beep went off and all of us started running, my feet got tangled up in the chaos, which caused me to fall forward and faceplant into the gym floor. Luckily, all that was bruised was my pride, and my face was just sore. But man, it sucks to having to sit out before even finishing a lap for the Fitness Gram PACE test. You know, I have a hard time reading out loud because of something that a teacher said. Not just because of my weird skipping around. Before this happened, I was a pretty expressive reader, doing voices for dialogue and things like that. Well, in 4th grade, my teacher told me and my parents that while my enthusiasm and expressiveness was a good thing, I needed to tone it down because I was slowing down reading time. I've struggled reading out loud ever since. The anxiety is rooted deep. Okay, so a lot of these stories so far have just been from my elementary school days. So let's head over to middle school. I went to 3 different middle schools, and this was also the time where I was moving from the city I grew up in to a small town across state. My first middle school was a STEM school that I was excited to go to because I had heard its name and latched onto it. That's literally it. This is where I picked up my violin and I joined the school's orchestra, which leads me to a story regarding my joining. Now, purple has always been my favorite color, and around that time I had recently gotten a purple violin. I asked my parents if they thought I'd be allowed to play it in the orchestra. They said they didn't see any reason why I couldn't, so I took it to school and showed my orchestra teacher and asking if I could use it. And you know what this lady said to me? She told me, I mean, it's a nice violin, but it's essentially a toy. Why don't you rent one from the school? A toy?! I cannot describe the amount of heartbreak I felt when my teacher said that. I did get a violin from the school, but I was seriously bitter. I did have fun playing in the orchestra, and as much as I would like to play again, I'd have to relearn just about everything in order to play the violin again. So I think everyone has at least one instance where parents and teachers tend to disagree, or just a general moment of their parents looking at their schoolwork and going, what the fuck is this? Well, here's a story of that happening with my mom. We were staying at my grandparents' at the time, and I was at the dining table doing my homework. And I had asked my mom to help me with my math homework. The specific math was Common Core math. If you know, you know. She walked over to me, took a look at my assignments, and then told me to go do the dishes while she wrote a note. The note she wrote basically said that she wouldn't have me do the assignments because, and I quote, Common Core is stupid and has no practical uses in real life. She gave me the note to give to my teacher. My 6th grade mind was very conflicted about this situation, so I would frequently ask Mama after that if I should do my math homework after that incident. And she would say, no. I eventually just went with it. Now, I want to be clear. As much as I love my mom, she handled this immensely poorly. Mama's actions could have seriously gotten me in trouble and screwed up my education, especially since I was more prone to listening to her instructions. I feel bad for my teacher that she had to get that note and deal with the stubborn child that was me. Do your homework, kids. Seriously, even if your parents find it a bit ridiculous. Eventually we moved to another town across state, and I went to both of the middle schools in town. Also, apparently, the school system was slightly different in the sense that 5th and 6th grade have their own designated school buildings. So instead of 3 general school levels, there was 4. It was a small instance of whiplash for us. Admittedly, nothing too insane happened during my time at these middle schools. Well, nothing I'm comfortable with sharing, since this was also a rather low and grim point in my life, and I'd rather not talk about that stuff. However, these are the school years where I found a shiny haunter during an after-school program, joined a basketball team but I wasn't that good, found out I had scoliosis and needed surgery in order to correct it, and got into animation and art YouTubers and got into my head that I could be doing art professionally one day. So yeah, there's that. When it comes to high school, I'd say the funniest thing that happened to me is accidentally signing up for a debate class in my freshman year. A class that also participated in tournaments. I did end up taking actual speech classes in my sophomore year, but those things were definitely done in the backwards order. While I had the idea of doing art professionally at the time of my junior year, I still had the aspiration of becoming an elementary school teacher. So I took a youth development class, which had the ever classic robot baby care assignment. Everyone in my family hated that thing. Ugh, I mentioned it in my Pokemon video, but that thing tainted galore for me because it would do its thing right when I got comfortable with playing. I've since restarted my shield file to give it a chance without that stress. And so far, it's going good. I'm pretty sure I did not sleep at all that weekend. I get tense remembering it. I don't hate kids. I'm gonna make that clear. Especially since I'm an aunt nowadays. But that assignment sucked. And it kind of made me decide not to go into elementary school education because I knew I would not be able to handle it. Especially since my ears are pretty sensitive to sudden loud noises, which young kids are kind of notorious for making. I did end up joining the art club in my freshman year, and I stuck with it until graduation. I even made vice president. They did this thing where if we raised enough money, we could go on an art trip. But COVID killed it. A shame. Truly. Actually, since the pandemic happened while I was in high school, my mind is super foggy because I learned I am absolute shit with online learning. I'm much better with in-person. I think the sense of structure was the main contributor to that one. Well, I'ma call it here. I hope y'all liked hearing me ramble about my school days. It was interesting to look back on all this stuff. Like I said, the art in the background was a small promotional piece I did of Major's journey. With all that said, stay loud and stay proud.